Yeah, so Mr. Miracle #1 from Tom King and Mitch Gerrits.
What a
I don't know
lovely
how his last name's
book.
actually pronounced. It's really
So here's
good.
the fun thing about
Um,
this. When I first saw it, I thought it was about Iron Man because it was kind of a small thumbnail,
The
and I was
first
like, "That
page.
looks like Iron Man. Why does it say DC?" I was I was really
Crossover.
confused.
and then did you turn to the first page and think that you were looking at
Yes, I
Superman?
was like, "Oh,
Because
I
I
guess
totally did.
Superman's in this. Superman and Iron Man are on a team together, and there
And
is
then he's
gonna be some
bleeding out
stuff."
and wearing a weird costume. Yeah.
Um,
And then they weren't.
Yeah.
but this really feels like the Tom King that I know and love from books like Vision and Sheriff of Babylon, in that it's a lot more introspective and is telling a story that is something more than just a traditional superhero narrative within the context of a superhero book.
Mhm.
And we talked about it a little bit, and you guys did both like it, right?
Yes,
Yeah, I did.
Okay, good.
this book reminds me of Underwinter.
Yeah, I
In
think
that
that's
it's
fair.
dark, it's surreal, it's trippy. There's weird stuff going on, and I don't totally get it yet, but I know I will if I keep reading.
I I do really like that this issue at least is kind of centered around the idea that Mr. Miracle can escape from anything. But he doesn't know if he can escape death, and so he tries to kill himself as his
Yeah, that's
greatest trick,
really cool.
which is super dark, and I think a really good way to start this story off with the character kind of at that point where he wasn't. It's not like he tried to kill himself to prove that he could escape death, but because he legitimately kind of wanted to die, and is in some ways disappointed that he was able to escape from it. I just think that was a really cool place to start this because it sets up a really interesting tone for this going forward, and the potential to deal with some really cool themes and topics that are kind of pushed aside in favor in the comic book world.
I want to that scene where he's talking about that. There's I really really like it for a lot of reasons. Just the framework of it, where he's on a talk show, like a late night show, and it's
Mhm.
like, "So what was your last big thing?" And he's just like, "Oh, just this little thing." He clearly doesn't want to talk about it, and the talk show guy eggs him on. And then so he gives this presentation about how he killed himself to try and escape death to see if he could. The artwork is really distorted. The colors are different.
Yeah.
It looks off, and then just like all of a sudden, like I'm done, and then the audience just starts laughing and clapping, and the talk show guy doesn't seem to give a shit. He's like, "Oh, we'll hear more about this after the commercials," and the framework is so creepy.
But I do really like Chad's point about the transitioning between like the TV show and reality,
Mhm.
and just like how the TV show is distorted, and it's because of how off-putting it is, and it fractures the narrative in an interesting way, where it'll go from, I really like Mitch Gerrits' art, but it is in some ways kind of conventional, and it'll flash from that to this weird, almost what looks like an alternate reality, kind of something out of dystopian fiction, and then back into the normal world where they're dealing with these really really heavy problems and issues, and just how unsettling both of those are, and that how unsettling that transition can be. And I think pulling off that transition is the fact that Tom King pulls it off with the elegance that he does is really impressive.
The cool thing about the art distortion is it looks like everything is underwater in those panels and getting like hazy and fuzzy. And since he's an escape artist who, dunks himself in water to get out, like you almost have to wonder like if this is some like escape gone awry and he's
Yeah,
having these hallucinations, because he's having
like that.
hallucinations later on in
Yeah,
the
that
book.
he's trapped in the TV or something, like in that talk show.
Or it's sort of like he can't escape.
Right.
I mean, like what a talk show host saying, like he's like, did you really escape death? And I feel like that moment was really tense for me, and just for the whole issue, the whole motif of the dark side is popping up. This book did a great job of just getting that tension going, and you don't even have to know who Darkseid is, but it's just like let's
Yes.
go. It's just creeping in, and then it just keeps stacking, and it's
something
storytelling's
that
just great.
right, and it's something that right off the bat I don't necessarily know that I fully understand or can predict where it's going, but there's an assurance here that that there's going to be some sort of payoff because of how invested I already feel like I am in the mystery surrounding a lot of that stuff. And in that sense, it kind of reminds me of Grant Morrison, which is, from me, I think one of the highest compliments that I can give a creator is saying that their book is comparable to the work of someone like Grant Morrison, who is just a creator that I think does some very fascinating stuff in this medium. And it kind of feels like King and Jared's are doing something similar with Mr. Miracle. So it's cool.
Yeah, and I see this book as very much not sort of chained to the standards of regular comic books. So I can definitely see them doing really cool stuff on art. And I sort of expect that going forward because this book blew me out of the water. And I think I've read it like 6 times.
Oh, wow.
And maybe that's because it's the physical copy, but like every time I see it, I'm like in my room, I'm like, yeah, I want to give it a read.
Yeah,
and,
I mean, it's a good comic.
Like I highly recommend picking this up. Get a second printing or something because the first printing's now like $20.
Is it really?
Yeah, but pick it up,
absurd.
give it a read, or wait for the trade. But this is it's a great start, and it's a DC book, so go DC for this week.